Welcome to this webinar on non-financial and integrated reporting in the European public sector. I am Melvin Neate. I chair the ECIIA's Public Sector Committee and will be your facilitator for the afternoon. As way of background, the ECIIA and EUROSAI are working together to promote governance, accountability and audit across the public sector in Europe. As a result of this collaboration, we are working on a project to assess the position on non-financial and integrated reporting. We have conducted a survey in more than 30 countries. This webinar is intended to share some of our findings, inform on the opportunities, difficulties and benefits, promote good practice and share our experiences. We are also hoping to hear your views and answer your questions. So let me first introduce our speakers. We have Tiiti Yli-Viikari, the Auditor General of Finland, Mark van der Meesen, General Manager of Audit Vlaanderen of Belgium, Jan van Schalkwijk, Corporate Executive of the South African Auditor General's Office, Soledad Llamas, Chair of the ECIIA EUROSAI Working Group and also Chief Audit Executive of Canal de Isabel in Madrid, and Martin Dees from the Netherlands Court of Audit. We also have Pascal van den Busch, who's the ECIIA Secretary General. Pascal will now explain some of the technical aspects of this webinar. Over to you, Pascal.
Thank you, Melvin. Good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of logistics, we will have two poll questions that will pop up on the screen and you will be able to answer immediately with your PC. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So please share your question using the Q&A button that you have in the top of your screen to raise your question, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. Welcome again, and back to you, Melvin.
Thank you, Pascal. I would now like to invite Tiiti to give the first presentation, Best Practices on Non-Financial and Integrated Reporting in the Public Sector in Finland. Over to you, Tiiti.
Thank you very much, Melvin, and a very good afternoon and good day to all. I believe we will be seeing the slides in the shared space. So what I would like to start with is to tell you a bit about the sustainability reporting as we are now starting in Finland, and then have a few reflections on how non-financial and sustainability reporting could be supported by auditors and why it might be important to do so. But I would like to start with a quote, and it's from the author of Winnie the Pooh, A.A. Milne, who said, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them." So what we are looking at is trying to see in the context in which we operate information and data that used to always be there, but was not mainly considered to be just as nice flowers as financial data. And now we're trying to look at, well, what are the new weeds in our fields that we should bring up and understand a bit better. And of course, sustainability reporting is linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, where we see that we have a role, all public actors have a role through our resources, our actions and our results on the impact on the implementation of the SDGs. And this has led the Finnish Treasury to call on all public administration in Finland to build a reporting, an integrated reporting system to also include that kind of data which is relevant for sustainability in Finland. And we can take the next slide, please. So what we're looking at is trying to link the past and what we know about history to how we see today and how we see the future evolving. So we're looking at information that actually will kind of complement what financial reporting gives us, the view that we have on that, and from a parliamentary accountability perspective in the public sphere. Now we're talking about giving a more complete view to Parliament on the impact of public sector action. So we have had over the years a lot of non-financial reporting that has been accumulating also next to financial reporting. So when discussing this issue with the financial auditors in my office, they wondered, well, how do we then see all of the information that has been given by government in government's annual report to the Parliament? Is that the new type of reporting we are talking about? And of course, today we're looking at a more whole of society approach. We're looking at what can be measured, what can be reported. Are there some phenomena that are not very easily reportable or measurable? And how can we then improve those if that's the case? So we are looking at from the needs perspective, what does the user of the information need? What are these? What will this information be used for? And that should be actually helping us decide on what kind of data to include in the integrated reporting as well. And we can take the next slide, please. So a few words on, well, how much this should be a push and how much this should be a pull effect. So by push effect, I mean that organizations themselves report, they are active on the reporting, and they provide the information to the taking account the needs of the stakeholders, but really going from their performance and their impact outwards. And then the pull factor is, of course, well, the answer to the question, who cares? Who are the users of the information? Is the Parliament interested in these questions? And what could the Parliament benefit from receiving such information? But of course, the pull and the push factors need to go together. If you don't have information, people can't imagine that that kind of information could be useful for them. And once you start a new tradition, a new information flow, people get more acquainted with those, and they will also see that the weeds are flowers because they get to know them. And so we can go to the next slide. There are some hindrances to how much of a push factor there can be. It can be seen as costly to provide other than financial information, financial reporting, because you need new practices, you need new tools, you need new methods, you need new data. And of course, we don't have historically very many key performance indicators on non-financial information, because we have considered previously that these issues are very hard to measure. And then we lack clear regulations and standards or like a toolbox for users and providers of this information to work in. And in the next slides, there are a few kind of ideas on, well, what then could help in such a new awakening. Of course, collaboration. So reaching out to different actors, discussing among peers, bridging some of those silos that we tend to have when we create a new reporting mechanism or we create new reporting needs. So integration is not just the reporting integration, it's also integration of different actors. And the next slide, please. Here you see just a blink of what we have done at the National Audit Office and in the public audit, external audit section. We have what we call the EUROSAI Working Group on Environmental Audit, which has provided some basic concepts and frameworks on how supreme audit institutions could approach sustainability reporting in the public sector. And here you find the link to this report. And in the next slide, you see just some examples from my own office on what kind of work we have done on both looking at what kind of sustainability reporting different government actors have put together previously to the new regulation, which calls for a more systematic approach, which is now new and which is unrolling throughout the year 21. And then some other recommendations, for example, on clean tech strategy and on and project funding. So with that, I'd like to end the small kind of peek view on what is happening in Finland, taking you back to A.A. Milne saying that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That's why we call it the present. And so we are now looking at what we know. That's the history of financial reporting. We are looking at tomorrow, integrated reporting. But most of all, we should be concentrating on reaching out to different actors and debating this issue, just as we are here today doing, in order to make it the best present for us and for our stakeholders possible. So thank you a lot. And I give the floor back to Melvin, please.
Many thanks, TT. That very informative presentation. Okay. The next part of the webinar, I would like to ask participants to take part in a poll. Pascal, if you could put the question up. Which types of non-financial information should be included in the annual report? And there you have a selection of choices plus others at the end. So could I ask you to please vote? Here we have some of the results coming up. Give it a few seconds. Okay, so which types of non-financial information should be included in the annual report? Governance seems to have the highest percentage on 36%, followed by environment 34%. Anti-corruption 17%. Then we get into social, human rights and board diversity and others 2%. Interesting responses, and indeed this is a question that we also posed in our survey, in our project survey. So I'd like to hand over to Soledad, who may like to comment on how this compares with the results of our survey. Thank you, Soledad.
Okay, thank you, Melvin. Good afternoon. The results from our survey show that non-financial information in public entities cover the following: environment protection and social responsibility around 40%, respect for human rights, anti-corruption and bribery, and diversity at company board level, these three nearly 25%, all of which are fully in line with the philosophy of the law. The law is the European Directive 2014/95, set up to improve the greater transparency for the largest European organization with regard to their non-financial information. Consequently, firms need to share data regarding environment protection policies, social responsibility strategy, anti-corruption and bribery tactics, the topics that we have voted. We can see both results are similar, poll and survey result, maybe the difference is about governance. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Soledad. I'd now like to invite you, Soledad, if you would give a presentation on some more of our survey results and to speak about the role and added value of internal audit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Melvin. Internal audit can play a fundamental role in promoting non-financial information and integrating reporting due to its independent position, global vision of a company, and a knowledge of risk. There are different roles that auditors can play, and this depends on the degree of maturity of the project. First, during implementation, you can audit the change management process as well as advise on how to approach the project. Once implementing, internal audit performs an assurance role that which may include assessing risk, defining the relationship of the three lines, and finally, by ensuring the effectiveness and efficiency of the process. All of this is possible thanks to the global view of the internal auditors. And now in this, regarding the survey results, internal auditors carry out an advisory role in 46% of the European country, and the role of assurance provider is around 27% for internal auditors. My colleague, Martin Dies, is going to speak after me about external audit results. Nevertheless, there is no significant difference between two functions. This is due to the fact that being in the initial phases, internal audits tend to assume more of a consultancy role. And with time and maturity, it's assumed more an assurance role. And now the question, how do companies add value and how can internal audit add value? Next slide, please. Companies receive capital elements, and according to their value, mission, strategy, and risk, they create new elements, and this process is how they create or add value. For example, do you know this bracelet? It is Pandora bracelet. Does your partner, mother, or sister have one? If so, this is the answer to your problems. You can simply give one more charm for the bracelet. It's a good gift, it's expensive, and you no longer have to think about sizes, color, or taste. Is this bracelet more beautiful than others? No, but this is how Pandora adds value. With the same capital as other companies, it's offers something different with another value. And now an example for the public sector. My company, Canal de Isabel II. Canal de Isabel II is a water company that provides water to more than 6 million people. We add value in different processes, but I want to explain wastewater. We receive this water, you can see in the picture. And of course, part of it returns to the river after a treatment. But another process with an added process can be used to irrigate parks and clean streets. And this is particularly important in Madrid, given that water is short. And in this process, we generate gas and electricity. And with the residue, we obtain the best compost for agriculture. And in Spain, we have an expression. Next slide, please. Del cerdo hasta los andares. We love everything about the pig, even how it works. And it's the same with the wastewater. We use or love to use every drop of wastewater. Compost, electricity, estrubita, gas, water irrigation. This is how a company adds value. This is how Canal Isabel II adds value. Next slide. It's impossible to ignore the importance of entities reporting to their stakeholders in order to explain how they create value and how they will continue to do so in the mid and long term. Better communication of objectives is of greater relevance in the public sector because citizens demand more transparency in management and the proper application of resources. And one to achieve this goal of transparency and communication is through integrating reporting. And internal audits in the public sector are also part of this process. Internal auditors add value by promoting this type of transparency and good governance projects, giving a global vision and knowledge of processes and risk. And last but not least, giving confidence and assurance to the audit committee in this process. And now, Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Soledad. And I quickly will refer to the picture you saw about the types of external auditor involvement relating to non-financial integrated reporting. And it is quite a mixed picture. You see that regarding the question whether non-financial information is audited by independent external auditors, 44% said yes and 41% said no. Regarding the question whether the audit was mandatory, it was 41% yes and 48% no. And regarding the current or potential roles of external auditors in relation to integrated reporting, roles that were distinguished were the advisory role and the role of assurance provider, besides a category called other. We could think, for example, about ambassador roles. So if you were advisor, assurance provider, and ambassador, you could speak about a AAA involvement by the external audit profession. You could say that external audit involvement is well underway in relation to this very important phenomena, and that the expectation is justified, and also the need that external audit involvement will be increased, given the importance and the momentum. Titi talked about the SDGs, giving momentum to the further development of these types of reporting. These types of reporting offer a very important auditors agenda, external auditors agenda, both for the supreme audit institutions as main external public sector auditors and also the accounting firms, the audit firms active in this field. And you can distinguish between 5 elements of this agenda. The first one is to promote these dimensions of public sector accountability, starting with recognition, starting to bring about the recognition of this type of responsibility to the public entities. Second element for the agenda, second item, provide and refer to relevant knowledge and experience. And there is quite some knowledge and experience available. So external auditors could serve as sparring partners to the management of the public sector entities. Third item on the agenda, Titi has already mentioned that also. Contribute to sensible, consistent reporting standards. And the knowledge, the expertise of the external auditors can be very valuable in that sense as well. Fourth element, develop audit methodology. And where necessary and where fruitful, include necessary other disciplines in doing so. And last but not least, provide assurance and disclose key audit matters and discuss on them. So, but this is a field of development where besides the internal auditors, the external auditors can also play a very important role. And that's where I would leave it and give back to Melvin.
Thank you very much, Soledad and Martin, for giving us a perspective from both internal audit and external audit. And I'm impressed by some of the similarities between the two in the roles that they carry out. We move now on to another polling question, which is to do with the type of assurance by auditors that should be provided. 2 choices here: fair view of the sustainability situation, or the process followed to report on sustainability is good. So could I ask you to please vote? Okay, we have some results.
Yes, we do, Melvin. So we have 64% that said that they give assurance on the statements that it's a fair view of the sustainability situation, and only 36% give assurance on the process that has been followed to give sustainability reporting.
Okay, well, they're both, sorry, I'm unable to see the slide at the moment, but 64-36, still fairly substantial percentages for each. This assurance, I guess, is from both external audit and from internal audit point of view. And if the process is no good, I guess we won't be really auditing what the process reveals, but interesting results. I think at this stage I'll move on. So could I please ask Mark to give the next presentation, please, which is the approach of the Flemish government. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Melvin. Okay, yeah. So I will shortly talk about the use of integrated reporting in our work area and what we consider are the building blocks for a coherent audit and control strategy and assurance. It's more a general presentation, but before I start, I will give first a little introduction so you get a better understanding of who we are and what we do. So Audit Flanders is an independent agency of the Flemish government. We report directly to the Flemish government, and our independence is guaranteed by two audit committees, one for the audits we do in the Flemish government and administration, and one for the audits we do within the local governments. So we do all different types of audit, like audit of the risk management, organization control, governance of an organization, process audits, IT audits, and all especially assignment is the forensic audit or the fraud investigations. We have a very vast and very diverse audit universe with more than 650 legal entities, and we are only with 50 auditors to cover it all. So it's a hell of a mission. So on the next slide, how do we work on sustainability and report about it in the Flemish government? And how do the local authorities work? Well, we use the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as a framework. The Flemish government has set long-term goals for the SDGs, and since Flemish government is competent for a lot of policy areas, all SDGs are translated in long-term objectives. So there are 53 goals defined, and the realization of these goals is monitored by in total 111 indicators, which is quite a lot. The goals and indicators were then approved by the Flemish government in 2019, and these goals and indicators are then now further translated into policy objectives for the period 2019-2024, and then are further translated into yearly objectives for the entities in charge of the implementation. So there's also a difference made between the internal objectives and the external objectives to society. And the same process takes place in the municipalities. And where relevant, there's also a coordination between the goals on the Flemish level and the goals on the local level. Next slide, please. So the monitoring and reporting, how the reporting on the realization of the goals set by the Flemish government is done on the level of the Flemish government administration as a whole. And there's now a shift towards more integrated reporting on entity level. So the municipalities have already longer experience with integrated reporting of financial and non-financial information to the public. And if there are SDGs in their long-term planning, then they are already part of this integrated reporting to the public. For the entities of the Flemish government administration, there's a start with an integrated reporting on budget and performance. In 2022, there must be an extended and integrated reporting that encompasses all the objectives of the entity, the budgets which are allocated to those objectives, and the realization rate and the social effect. And this must then be supported or proven by reliable and objective indicators. There's a lot of work that has to be done. So how are we, as a relative small audit agency, are going to give assurance about this integrated reporting? Like good scouts, we want to be prepared, and we have identified and are working on 3 building blocks that we consider are the basis for coherent assurance, but not only for the reporting risk, but for all the tasks we have to perform. The first of the building block is single audit. Certainly in the Flemish government, and I suppose it's in other governments it's a bit the same, there are a lot of actors involved in control and audit. And we all share the same goal, namely create better, more effective, more efficient, reliable, and quality-driven government organizations. But these goals, we cannot achieve them alone. We have to work together. So it's important that there's no duplication of efforts, no double or triple requests of the same information. We want to be considered as a partner in achieving the objectives rather than as a burden. So we have a single audit strategy that's already in place, in which we continually align the planning, we share the methodology and information. So there's a steering committee with representatives of the Court of Audit, the Institute of Public Accountants, the Inspection of Finance, the Department of Finance and Budget, and I am the representative in there for the audit Flanders, for the internal audit part. We meet at least 4 times a year, and the topic this year, in 2021, is what will be the role and responsibility of each actor in the assurance of the new integrated reporting. And then we have another building block. It's the second building block, and I consider it the most important one. It's how are we going to implement a professional state-of-the-art risk management in each of the public entities. Sound risk management is the basis for an efficient and effective internal control, which ensures that it's tailor-made for the organization, focus on the most important risks, and the enhancement of the realization of the goals. If the realization of the sustainability goals are then part of reliability and of financial and non-financial information, then that must be part of the strategy and planning cycle, so they can also be indicated which risks are there connected. So risk management is also a key element for the coordination of efforts of the audit and the control actors. And because of that importance, we perform audits of the risk management in every organization and monitor the progress on a yearly basis. That's for the Flemish government administration. We cannot do that yet for the local government because there are so a lot of them, more than 300, so we cannot do that. We use a maturity model to map the situation and to measure the progress, and this is part of our yearly reporting to the government. It also includes the progress of the realization of the recommendations, and that's very important, it's also part of the yearly evaluation of the leading official of an agency of a department. And in the next slide, you have an idea how we evaluate the different aspects of risk identification and evaluation, and all the different aspects of it's a bit too fast. All the different aspects of the control of risks. So different components, and we give them a maturity level, which ranges from 0, and there's nothing in place, to 5, which is an optimized system. And we make then a weighted average of the part of the risk identification and evaluation and a weighted average of the control of risks. And this allows us also, that's the next slide, to make a benchmark of the different entities of the Flemish government, and is also reported to the minister and gives an extra stimulus to the entities to improve their risk management, give a bit of competition. And then we have the third building block, that's the next slide, that is the assurance mapping, because we are with 4 big partners, but there are also a lot of other actors in the 3 lines of defense. So if there's an extensive risk analysis, we can plot the actions of the different actors of the 3 lines of defense. And this gives an overview of which risks are covered by which actor. And we apply this only because in entities who have a mature risk management already, so that we can be sure that for all the processes, the risks have been identified and we can plot each actor. The colors give an indication of the level of coverage and assurance activities. And this instrument gives us the means to create a coherent and well-aligned assurance of all the aspects of the functioning of an entity. Then, my last slide. If all the different building blocks are filled in properly, we can focus on our organization-wide assignments, our objectives as Audit Flanders, by which we can cover broad teams in multiple organizations. And in the case of the liability of non-financial information, we cover the processes, for instance, used by the Flemish Statistical Authority, who give reporting on most of the indicators, and are now with an audit in the local authorities of the monitoring process that are used. So in conclusion, a good use of these building blocks and the development of these building blocks will help us to create a coherent and broad assurance of the good working of our government institutions. And this is not only limited to the coverage of risks of reliability of information, but helps us in covering all the important risks that are involved in all the objectives of internal control. So we hope to develop this further in cooperation with all of our partners. Thank you. And I think it's now Pascal or Melvin.
Thank you, Mark. It's back to me. Thank you very much for that presentation, Mark. That gave us a real insight into a practical situation of what actually gets done or is planned to be done. So thank you very much for that. At this stage, I'll then invite Jan, who is our last speaker, to talk about the value of non-financial and integrated reporting. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Melvin, and good afternoon to all participants here from the southern tip of Africa. Mark, just a quick reflection. It was wonderful to sit in a global conference and see slides in a language that very closely resembles my home language, South Afrikaans. So thank you for that. That certainly made for a welcome change from other interventions. If we move to the next slide, I just want to give a little bit of background to the South African situation when it gets to integrated reporting or the auditing or reporting of non-financial information. I think the value proposition correlates pretty well with what I've heard this afternoon. It makes sense to have comprehensive reporting. It definitely makes for better decision making. But I think most of all for us, and perhaps specifically from a public sector point of view, it becomes an important guard against fraud and corruption. We are acutely aware in South Africa over the last decade under our previous president, President Zuma, where there was an erosion of governance and probably a whole-scale corruption. And that a lot of that could have been prevented if A, we had proper, detailed, integrated reporting, or B, and you'll see that features quite a bit in my presentation, people reacted to these integrated reports, if they understood and could act on those. Private sector uptake for integrated reporting is quite good in the South African context. Perhaps in public sector it's slightly less, but we do see the emergence of strong performance reporting in our public sector. And just to clarify, performance reporting probably covers the elements that Titi has already referred to in her presentation. So it's starting to stretch into that broader realm of sustainable reporting. The uptake among state-owned enterprises is pretty good, although that's a smaller portion of the South African public sector. In our audit office, we believe that we need to respond, and in the way that we respond to this integrated reporting, and we can set an important example. If we deal constructively with it, we can convince government to lift its game in integrated reporting. So for us, first of all, auditing non-financial reporting information in a constructive way was quite important. And we need to flag the contribution of the Supreme Audit Institution of New Zealand that was quite instrumental in helping us on the first steps in that regard, probably about a decade ago. It's grown into something quite constructive. But we also believe that leading by example extends to our own practices. So we've gone out a decade ago to really lead in public sector in our own reporting and make sure that what we put on the table once a year to Parliament represents a top in the integrated report, and something that we're very proud of. A couple of practical lessons before I get to showing you examples of what we do. I think Tiki has also referred to the first point, the credibility of frameworks of reporting. It's wonderful that people adopt a broader sense of reporting beyond just financial management, whether it's performance reporting, whether it is sustainability reporting. But if you don't have a strong framework that underpins it, it does tend to become a problem. I suppose in public sector, we're all aware, Mark, you've just talked about the municipal sector. If you don't have consistency within a sector on those basic accounting frameworks, or for that matter, other reporting frameworks, you may find yourself in a lot of trouble. The consistency of reporting, the ability to do trend analysis may be severely compromised. The second one, and you'll see that I spend a lot of time on it in the rest of my presentation, is the fact that the users of non-financial information must be able to understand and follow. It's wonderful to do something that is academically correct or academically impressive. It's another thing to take people with on this journey. And when I think about this in public sector context, I think about whether Parliament can realistically use integrated reporting, whether committees of Parliament, those charged with oversight, and for that matter, the citizens of a country can actually use these. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that. I think there's a big duty on all auditors to not just think about financial reporting or perhaps regularity auditing where you bring a legislative angle to it, but to think about whole of government reporting on these issues. It's certainly the challenge that the United Nations leave to all of us, and I think we really need to find a way to step up to have comprehensive whole of government reporting from external audit side, but also reporting that's interesting enough for citizens to take them with on a story that solves the concept at hand. I do make a point about private and public sector auditors. I think there's quite a gap emerging when it gets to integrated reporting, because it talks about a very detailed understanding of a sector that you're dealing with. And lastly, I thought it was just appropriate to reflect also on potential gaps. One may find that if you're in the area of reporting on non-financial information, that there is a gap between what you report on and what your citizen experience. So if you and our situation reflect on performance reporting, and you talk about the accuracy and the relevance of the reporting, in other words, the honesty of government in doing performance reporting, that may not always equate to the experience of a citizen. And I think for us, it's becoming very clear that there's also a space in this whole debate for social audits. I think our colleagues in the Supreme Audit Institution of India, we talk extensively about it. For them, it's developed to the point of social audit being an integral part of their audit approach, the way that their government functions. And social audit defined as the auditing of service delivery experience by the citizen. So those just as reflections very briefly. I've gone on quite a bit about the fact that integrated reporting is important, but also that you need to have a storyline that sells the concept to people out there. And for that matter, that auditors have got the sense to respond to that very same storyline. So I want to take you through a couple of examples, Pascal. I know I'm going to move rather quickly, but for a moment, imagine an audit report that does the following storyline. But does this for our whole municipal sector, so that's about 285 municipalities in South Africa. First of all, a definition visually of what accountability means, that try and explain to the citizen where strategic planning fits in, where internal control fits in, where different role players fit in, what consequences there need to be to government if things fail, and what audit outcomes can confirm to the citizen. If we move to the next slide, you then see that we reduce what's traditionally in a financial audit report to a single slide. And hopefully you can work out that the colors mean what it normally means in our society, green being good, red being bad news. You'll see that unfortunately in our municipal environment, the green is rather limited. It speaks to a definition that we've coined called clean audit. And if you allow me a moment to read the academic definition, clean audit is therefore defined as an indicator of government's strategic positioning, its ability to manage the risks and opportunities related to that strategy, therefore creating a solid foundation for service delivery to the benefit of a citizen. You can see we're probably not doing very well. You see the other audit opinions below that. But it's when we move to the next slides that you start getting a feel for what you can do in this visual format. You can very quickly tell them that there is a discrepancy between the strength of financial statements and performance reporting. That the correlation is probably weak if you sit with quality ratings of 35% of people that submit quality performance reports. Or for that matter, if you sit with only 19% of your whole community giving you quality financial statements. On the next slide, it starts expanding on that bad trend and say, well, where does this sit? And it relates to the last decade in South Africa, the fact that there's absolute disregard for the letter and the spirit of the law. You can see how we've analyzed basic compliance with legislation. You can see the reds again indicating that it's perhaps not good news. But it's when you build further, you add to your storyline, say, well, now we've dealt with these academic things. Next slide, Pascal. Now you get a sense of why things go terribly wrong. So you've seen the academic definition of compliance that fails, but now you put it in rand values. 62 billion rands are spent in contravention with legislation. And you see again a red indicator that says, well, even though we know about it, we don't act. We don't try to recover money. We don't try to get somebody in jail. There's no consequences for that. Now you start speaking to that experience of a citizen that say, I see a councillor, I see a mayor in my local authority that gets away with murder, and you know where to point the finger. So Pascal, if we go to the next slide, you can then very quickly relate it at a country level to certain failures in service delivery. You can see that in this instance, we've unpacked water infrastructure, sanitization, and road infrastructure. Then drill it down in the next slide to what we call root causes. And you can see that we've not used technical speak there. We've talked about certain areas that slow to respond, and the instability that we find politically, vacancies or lack of competencies, but also then inadequate consequences. The fact that we all know what's going wrong, but nobody is taking action. In this specific report that dealt with local government, the conclusion paragraph, the punchline of what needs to happen going forward, sits on the next slide. The strength of this visual representation allowed us to go back to government and ask for additional powers for us as the External Audit Office. You can see that we've coined a new phrase, a material irregularity, and it's given us 3 additional powers, that of referring material irregularities to other investigative bodies and demand action. And the fact that we, instead of just saying that we are reporting on certain trends, we've now got the right in our audit reports to do legally binding remedial action. And for that matter, if you look at the right, we've now got the right to issue a certificate of debt. In other words, we can go recover money on behalf of the government. That's the strength of building a storyline and having a coherent message, but even the most basic educated citizen in a rural environment can follow. That your oversight committees can follow with ease, because it speaks the language of the day. If we go to the, I think, last slide, Pascal, I think you've originally asked me to just reflect on 3 specific questions. And I want to use that as an opportunity to just very quickly conclude. The value of non-financial reporting and integrated reporting for an organization. There's the obvious things. The fact that it strengthens accountability, it gives you a good sense of the governance, it gives you the better decisions. But for us, I think it is that you can take a whole country, a whole citizenry in a country on a specific journey towards a specific goal. I think a couple of commentators talked about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And for us, reporting in an integrated way, and also for auditors to respond to that, is a strong element of actually moving you forward in that regard. What's the impact of this on the organization's strategy and governance? Well, it gives you a broader reflection. So let me think about a traditional audit firm's strategy. It's probably somewhere between revenue and audit reports, or number of audit reports. What we've tried to do in our setup is to look at a broader dimension. So ours look at 4 areas. And being South African, we love combining the letters. So we said we've got a 4V strategy. There is making sure that our audits add value, the value adding aspect. So it's not just audits. If it can't reach the citizen, it's probably not worth doing. There's a second element to that, and that's visibility of leadership. The fact that we don't just blindly report, but that we engage on that we get out there, engage with Parliament and the citizenry. The third element is that of viability. In other words, our own finances, our own sustainability, our own footprint on the environment. And the last one is a reflection on the fact that everything that we do need to be value-based. So we talk about transformation, which is quite big in our country, but we also talk about our integrity, our ethics, etc. So just by committing to integrated reporting, it immediately forces your whole strategy and your whole opinion on governance to add a layer of complexity, if you like, but to, in general, be more constructive. It's just a wider footprint altogether. Lastly, you asked me how to promote this in an organization. Well, I think by now you know that I'm going to say a good storyline in your report will sell and will take your people with. But you've got to make this part of a corporate DNA. It's got to become part of everything that you do. Integrated reporting is not a year-end thing. It's something that's there in your strategy. It's something that's there in your performance contracts. It's there in the way that you reward people. When you think about increases or bonuses, it's got to be a consideration there. If it's not part of your corporate DNA, you're bound to fail. Then my very last slide, Pascal, I think goes all the way back to where the commentators started off. If we've got all these fantastic, ambitious development goals, and the one that's probably from your point of view most relatable sit in the middle, the UN SDGs. In Africa, we've got Agenda 2063. South Africa, we've got a National Development Plan for aimed at 2030. We want to achieve these things. Whole of government reporting and whole of government auditing is absolutely critical. You'll see right at the bottom of the slides words, perhaps rather critical words from our Chief Justice in South Africa, in the context of the last 10 years of corporate failures, probably. He's talking about integrated reporting and whole of government auditing in this way. He's saying that failure to be disciplined in the way that you use public resources would not only attract consequences, but serious consequences. Those consequences, and for that matter, those pleasures, those benefits that's associated with these plans can only realize if we've got good reporting, good integrated reporting, if we get comfortable with non-financial reporting, and if we as external auditors respond in the most constructive way. Thanks, Melvin.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan. Wow, a lot to think about there. We're on to, we have time for a question and answer session. Pascal, have we had any questions?
I have a problem. Yes, thank you, Melvin. We do have few questions, so I will start with the first one. What about the risk that non-financial report in the public sector will be manipulated, criticized from a political point of view? And how should we behave in this kind of situation? So what are your recommendations from an internal audit point of view, but also from an external audit point of view, please?
Thank you very much. Can I ask Mark, can you give a response, and then perhaps Titi could give a response?
Okay, yeah, that's a real risk, because we encountered that risk when we did the audit of the statistical authority, because it's those indicators are also in the evaluation how politicians are doing in reaching their objectives of what they're told. So we try to cover that with we had covered it with a focus on the independency of the statistical authority, so that's maximized. And the second thing is it's also in their interest that there is a good reporting and that there are objective indicators correct the goals and the objectives of the political possibilities, the financial possibilities. If you put it all together, you can make better policy.
Thank you. Titi, have you any comment?
Yes, thank you, Melvin, and thanks, Mark, for those insights. From my point of view, I think the risk is really that in integrated reporting, we are looking on the time spectrum. As I said in my presentation, we're not just looking at the history. We're not just looking at what happened in the past in the financial terms. We're also integrating elements of the future into that reporting. So we're including elements that have a high risk of not turning out as they are forecasted or foreseen. And therefore that has a higher risk of interpretation, or as the question was framed, even manipulation, or using only partial knowledge to suit one's purposes. But all in all, I guess that risk also lies in the present as well. I mean, there's so much information that people can always pick and choose, and the pick and choose risk, will not go away. They will just have more to pick and choose from. If used in a more comprehensive and maybe kind of all-encompassing, so whole of government or whole of society way, with policy coherence, measurements or impact assessments integrated, I think we will still have a more complete picture, and therefore we will also have more solid voices countering such potential risk of manipulation or of sub-optimizing whatever information is presented to benefit one's own means. So in short, the risk is there today, the risk will be there tomorrow, but all in all, we will have more information to build a more complete picture with integrated reporting.
Thank you very much for those responses. Pascal, I think we might have time just for one more question.
Thank you, Melvin. I would like, it's a question from myself actually, so I would like to ask to the panelists, what about the skills? Because with non-financial reporting, we are touching on many different types of information, KPI, very far away from the financial background that many auditors have. So what is your suggestion on this aspect?
Thank you. Jan, can I ask you for a response?
Yes, definitely, Melvin. I think you're entirely correct. You need to think very differently. You can't just think financial auditors in the traditional sense of the word. I think all of us in public sectors probably over the years become comfortable when we focus on performance auditing, but there's got to be different colleagues around the table. So engineers, doctors, name them, other professions become a very important part of your performance audit team. And now it brings those areas closer together. It means that no audit team can go out just with financial auditors anymore. You've got to get comfortable that these experts in the field are really the guys that's going to drive your deliverables. I'll give you a good example. The recent year, we've brought out 2 special reports on government's reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic around us. That's not audits led by financial auditors. They were in the background. It was led by medical doctors. And the success of that, the uptake by the citizenry and by government was immense. So get used to the fact that audit firms are not staffed by auditors, which is probably a good thing.
Thank you very much, Jan. Right, time prevents us from any other questions, but if there are any other questions, we'll try and answer them offline. It remains for me just to give a quick conclusion on where we are. Very difficult to conclude on all the information that we've heard today. Suffice it to say, there's a huge demand for public accountability. Non-financial reporting and integration can help in a number of ways: improve governance, accountability, transparency, decision-making, both internal and the information produced but also by promoting non-financial reporting and integration reporting. Next steps. We will do a short report on the key messages from this event. The Working Party will be producing a report giving more details of the surveys, examples of good practice across the European public sector and others. And we will be engaging more with people, including with the European Commission through the DG FISMA. It only remains really for me to thank all of the speakers and to everyone participating in this webinar. The more I go to these webinars, the more I learn about the vast potential, the huge potential for adding value through non-financial and integrated reporting. Just one final thought, going back to where we started. I think auditors are flowers too, once you get to know them. Take care, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.
Bye. Good afternoon.
Take care.